Oh, wow. This is crazy.
Why?
I don't know. It just is. Are we starting?
Yeah, it's going.
Oh, you hit record already?
Yeah, it's all recording.
Okay.
He ran.
He did.
He's like, oh no.
I don't want to be a part of this. This is going to be weird. No, it's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun.
Yeah.
How are you?
Stressed about doing this because I've never talked about it in a format where it wasn't a one-on-one conversation, or it is a one-on-one conversation, but it's going out to the masses. So it's a little bit different.
That's true, but it's just us.
That's true.
You and I.
Us and
Your
lots of viewers later.
Hey, I hope lots of viewers later.
Yeah,
Don't
I
take
mean,
that
I do
the wrong
too.
way.
I do too, because I want obviously to get my message out there, and I don't know. I feel like it will explain a lot. If I have people that watch this that knew me back then, it might explain me a little bit more about why I was the way that I was growing up. And so, I don't know. I do hope other people watch it just to see kind of what happened.
So they could like take a different perspective at it.
Yeah, because I feel like every kid deals with bullying, and I'm sure I was not the nicest kid in the world either. This all happened in middle school, so it's also the worst time like of adolescence when it happened. So that makes it a little bit more difficult too.
Right.
So but yeah, so
let's do an introduction real quick
okay, all right.
So thank you guys for tuning in to Henry's Every Angle podcast. Throughout everyone who has been on the podcast so far, she has seen me in a very intoxicated, screwed up, throwing up on the floor when I was like 20 years old.
Good times.
Yeah. I mean, 21 years old.
21. Great times. Great times.
Genevieve, I'm happy to have you here.
Thanks.
I'm happy that you are wanting to spread this knowledge out.
Yeah, for sure.
Get your story out there so that way other people can learn from it.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's like the entire point of this. That, and I mean, have a good time too, obviously.
Yeah. No, I think it'll be good. It'll be therapeutic in a sense, and maybe the first stepping stone that I need to actually do something and not just think about how it's impacted my life, but rather, I don't know. I've thought about doing a blog. I've thought about doing my own kind of recording. Then the whole TikTok thing got weird, and I don't really like TikTok. So no offense to those that really like TikTok. It's just very, it's a sketchy subject and platform right now. So I didn't want to go that route either. But yeah, no, I'm hoping this will be like a good jump off for me, for myself too.
No, it was good. So you were...
I just hit my chin on the microphone. Did you just see that?
I hope it created like the biggest noise. And you can move it around too.
It's okay. I'm good.
So you were marked with, or falsely diagnosed with a eating disorder.
Yeah. So kind of all stems from, so this was, the eating disorder diagnosis happened when I was in 6th grade. The very beginning of 6th grade for me.
What's up, you guys? I'm sorry for interrupting this wonderful, wonderful fucking story that Genevieve is willing to be able to tell us today. She is an extremely powerful woman for being able to share her story from her traumas from when she was a child. It affected her throughout her entire lifespan, and she is willing to put her stuff out there only to be able to help others. And the only way we're going to be able to continue to do that is through your support. I need you to be able to go down to the bottom of the screen, click that subscribe button. Please click that like button. Smash that like button, actually. Go ahead and do it. It's the only way this channel is going to grow. It's the only way I'm going to eventually be able to make money, to be able to produce even better content, get better knowledge, gain better experience. I'm not going to hold you up any longer. Thank you again for all your support. Let's get back to the show.
The diagnosis it came as a shock for everyone because my primary thing was I was anxious. I was just always a very anxious kid. And I kind of stopped going to school. I had a really hard time going to school. And that raised some red flags for the nurse at the school at the time, who wanted to call Child Protective Services on my parents if they didn't do something. They thought that they weren't feeding me. They thought they were abusing me, which was not the case at all. So it really actually stems from me being really little. So I think I was like maybe 4, and I was in those little kid dance classes. And I was with twins that both apparently had the stomach flu. And they were on either side of me. And I remember we had to hold hands. And my mom has kind of told me some of this too to like remind me what, happened. But anyway, they had just been sick. And so, of course, I caught it. And I was extremely sick. Like, I was not great. I remember my parents having to call to get medicine to help stop me throwing up. I was only like 4. And ever since then, I had this terrible fear of throwing up. It was very debilitating because I wouldn't do certain things. I was excessively washing my hands. People couldn't say the word vomit. They couldn't say the word throw up.
Anything that made you think of it.
Anything. And then, when you're in elementary school, like kids will just like throw up in class. And that was like
triggering.
Oh, it was so bad. It was like, I couldn't walk near them. I couldn't go over to the desk that they had gotten sick at. I didn't want to go to school. I was just so terrified I was going to catch it. And that was like my whole existence, was just being terrified of catching the stomach flu. And so I remember it got to the point where I did get sick. I think it was 3rd grade. And if I got sick wearing a certain outfit or like a shirt or something like that, my mom had to throw it away because I would never wear it again. Even if it was washed, I would never wear that shirt again. I'd never put that outfit on again. I couldn't touch it. And I, again, excessively washing my hands. It got to the point where I was excessively taking my temperature. Yeah. Like within a minute, I was taking my temperature like 10 times within a minute. Like it would go off and I would just put it right back. And then my parents had to actually hide the thermometer from me because it got that excessive. And I would even remember the meals that I would eat the night that I would get sick. So then I couldn't eat that meal on a Wednesday night in such and such month because that's what I ate at that time when I got sick. So it was getting more intense as I was getting older. So by the time I hit 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I had developed this thought in my head that if I limited the amount of food that I ate, I wouldn't throw up because there'd be nothing in my stomach to throw up. So I myself wasn't eating as much because the anxiety around eating was that I was going to I would get sick.
You had fear of throwing up.
Yes, which is emetophobia, which I didn't find out had a name until a couple years ago, actually. Just from being on the internet and looking for other people that are strange like me. And so because I had lost all of that weight and things had gotten really hard for me to eat, I was back in 2007, 2006 to 2007. I was 67 pounds and I was in 6th grade and I was pretty tall as a kid too. So I was a legit string bean. And I had a really hard time going to school because I was scared that I would throw up and my parents wouldn't be there. I'd have no way of getting home. It would be embarrassing because what if it happened at school? And so I was just also anxious, which makes you nauseous. So I just didn't feel good all the time. And 6th grade is like the year where schools, like the different elementary schools come together and you like set your friend base, you know? And so I feel like my whole world was kind of turned upside down because I didn't get that friend base like at all. You know, I was kind of like missing that structure because I pretty much missed almost all of 6th grade. So it started to get worse December of 2006. I was refusing to go to school. I wouldn't get on the school bus. My mom was trying to get me to go. I didn't want to stay in the classroom. I was trying to get the seat closest to the door in case I needed to jump up and run out of the classroom. I was like really struggling. And I wanted help. I wanted to gain weight because I didn't want to look like this child. Yeah, I was like in 6th grade. I was like, for lack of a better way of saying it, like I wanted boobs. I wanted to like look like I was becoming an adolescent, not a child. And I was not going to because I wasn't gaining weight. And with that being said, that's when the nurse had the red flag of like something's going on. She threatened my parents with child protective services. So my parents looked into what they could do to get me help. They had me talk to so many different people. Everybody was saying I had generalized anxiety disorder. And I eventually wound up going to a very well-renowned eating disorder hospital in the Maryland area. And the day that I was admitted, it's kind of a blur. I was crying a lot because I knew that I was going to be staying inpatient for a while. And my sister and my mom and my dad took me to kind of get me registered and admitted and everything. And they asked me some really strange questions. Like, I'm 11 years old. They're asking me if I was being abused at home, if my parents were hurting me, why did I have a bruise? And I was like, well, I was playing outside and I fell. But they were asking for the purpose of, are your parents hurting you? Yeah. And when you're 11, you're not used to getting asked those questions. And I come from a very loving and caring family. So I was like, why are you asking me this? This is super weird. I had told them, I was super anxious. My stomach hurt all the time. I was nauseous, the whole 9 yards. Long story short, I ended up getting admitted. And this hospital, the way they had it set up, there were, at the time, I believe it might have changed now, but adults, children, teenagers, we were all together. There was no separation between ages. They tried to separate us as best they could by age in our rooms because there would be 5 hospital beds to a room.
So you didn't even have much privacy either?
No, there was no privacy. And I was one of the youngest girls there. There were 2 of us that were 11. Everyone else was either in high school or an adult. So everyone in my room was in high school or about to go to college. So it was very eye-opening because these were actual girls that had eating disorders. And I met one person who was covered in scars. She had been trying to cut the fat out of her body with scissors. There was another girl there that was covered in burns because she would burn herself. So she had a lot of hair missing. It was really, really hard to see all of that at 11.
I was going to say that's not something an 11-year-old typically sees.
Yeah, and so when you go there, your stuff is taken from you. You can't have shoelaces, you can't have belts, you can't have headphones, you can't have anything that is a string that you could hurt yourself with. So all that's taken away. At 11, I was still playing with Barbies and dolls. I couldn't bring any of them in because they might create negative body image. So I had to leave all of my toys, essentially. All I really had was silly putty because I liked to play with it. It was distracting. and just like blankets and photos and things like that. So I didn't really have my typical stuff that I had at home. We were woken up every morning at 5:30 in the morning for blood work. We would get a 5-minute shower. That was the only time you were allowed to shower during the day. It had to be 5 minutes. And there were a lot of people, so you had to make it quick. You would then wait in a hallway that was really cold, and you'd sit up against a wall, and you'd go in one after the other. They took blood every single day. They weighed you every single day. And it was freezing cold in those rooms. It was not warm. And then you would kind of start your day, whether it be therapy or the first meal. You'd meet with psychologists and psychiatrists. And for me, this was like really terrifying because I was still really homesick. I couldn't go to sleepovers as a kid because I was really anxious. Like, what if I got sick at somebody's house in the middle of the night? Like that would be so embarrassing. That would be miserable. I would feel terrible. So I would never be able to last at a sleepover. Like, my parents would always have to come pick me up. We'd like call them at like 12 a.m. My parents would have to come pick me up from the kid's house because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I was still having that problem at the age of 11. So when I was now in this hospital where I was like a long-term sleepover, I was I don't want to do this.
And you're still having that fear though,
right?
At the exact same time, and no one else knows it besides you, really.
Right. I mean, I've said to them numerous times, I'm scared of throwing up. I'm scared of throwing up, and they just kind of were like, "You have an eating disorder and anxiety." We would have these like group therapy sessions where they would like have you trace your body and then like write the things on it that like you don't like about yourself as like therapy. And I just everywhere wrote too skinny, need to eat more, like need more weight here. Like I was trying so hard to get them to understand that I didn't have an eating disorder. Like I was like, I have to prove to them that this is not what's going on with me.
Yeah, you're like, I don't have anorexia.
Right. This is not what I have. And everyone else in there is like, I'm fat here. I'm like, I was like, how can I get them to understand what I'm trying to say? Right. And so it got to the point where, they weren't listening to me, and I didn't know what else to do. And one of the other things was, we were given these really large meals, and like everyone ate the same size meal. And there was like chicken and like sides, and they were like, you had to eat all of it. And if you didn't finish all of it, you weren't allowed to see your parents. Like you couldn't have visitors. And when you don't eat a lot of food, your stomach shrinks. Not physically, but you can't eat as much, So, I was like, okay, but I was gung-ho. Like I need to see my parents, So I am eating all of my food, and I would get very close to the end, and I would have like 3 or 4 bites left. And I couldn't do it. And they would basically say, okay, you didn't finish your food, so you're not going to see your parents, or you can drink this Ensure, and then you can see them. Now keep in mind, I had just eaten this giant meal except for a couple of bites, and they want me to now drink this 16-ounce, 8-ounce, 16-ounce Ensure that's thick. I don't know if you've ever had an Ensure or anything like that.
I've never even heard of it.
It's like all of these nutrients that you would need, and they give it to a lot of like old people that are like not able to eat a full meal anymore. Like it basically,
like a meal substitute.
It's a meal substitute. Okay, so I've just eaten a full meal, and now they want me to drink this meal substitute. Well, I was one of those kids that was like, all right, I'm gonna get it done, and I would chug it. So the first time that happened, I did that, and there were like 3 phones that were in there that you could use to call family or friends. And I had just had the full meal, and I had just drank the Ensure, and I called my mom on the phone because I felt so sick. And I was crying on the phone. I was like, Mom, I'm going to get sick. I don't feel good. Like, I'm so full. I'm going to throw up. She's like trying to calm me down. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And it happened. I got sick all over the phone, and it had to get thrown away. There was no repairing the phone. And I was immediately punished. I had to clean it up. No one was allowed to help me. And then I was ostracized by the rest of the patients for ruining one of their phones that they could use to call their family. So that kind of pattern continued for a while, where I would do everything I could to eat all of the meal. I would have to drink one of the insurers, and then I would get sick, and then I'd have to clean it up. And it was an entire pattern. And it wasn't like they gave me a mop and a bucket. They gave me paper towels, and I had to get on my hands and knees and clean it up. Like, it was not.
Did they think that you were purposely trying to make
Yes.
yourself throw up?
Yes. They thought that I was binging and purging. They thought that I was bulimic, and I was purposely making myself throw up, even though everywhere in my chart said is scared of throwing up. Didn't matter.
Did they watch you throw up?
I would try and hide it because I was so embarrassed. So I would run. I would be in a group therapy session, and I would run out of the room and down a hallway, just trying to get to a trash can or something. But they didn't have those around because they didn't want kids purposely getting sick. So it would just happen, and there was no stopping it. Like, I was so full, and so that was really, really, really traumatizing for me. There was a time where I fell asleep with my silly putty in my hand, and it was like glow in the dark silly putty, and it got stuck to one of the bed sheets in my bed, and I got called to my room because they thought that I had gotten sick in my bed, and I had to say, turn the lights off, it'll glow in the dark. It's glow in the dark silly putty. Like, they were constantly looking for anything.
Just harassing again and again.
Yeah, it was terrible. My parents, I finally made it to a part of the program where my parents could bring me home for the night. So I was allowed to come home at night, but I had to go back during the day. And when I look back at some of those photos of like when I would go there, I barely remember it. I was so zonked. They were giving me Zyprexa at the time and Prozac. And the Zyprexa would just knock me out. I was like a zombie. And I would have therapy sessions and be like asleep half the time. Like, I had no idea what was being asked of me, what was being said, where I was, who I was. Like, I had no idea what was even going on. And it got to the point where I didn't know what else to do. Because I wanted to go home so bad. I wanted to be done. It was this very, 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 very traumatic experience. They had us in this like room all together. I remember we had lockdowns because somebody had tried to kill themselves. We had people trying to sneak food out, sneak food in, sneak all kinds of things in. Like, it was wild when you think about it. But I did become kind of close with some girls that were in my room, and they became my friends. But we all lost touch when we left. And I think from what I've heard now when I talk to my therapist about it is that if they find out you have anybody's contact information from the hospital, they will remove it from your belongings. So I always thought I was just kind of going crazy that I couldn't find this journal that I had written everything in, but now it makes sense. Somebody took it.
Yeah, you would have had to memorize their information.
Right. So this went on for the entire month of January, where I was just in and out of literal consciousness, crying, telling people I want to go home, the whole thing. Finally reached a breaking point where I lost it a little bit, and the director had come in one night and I was in trouble. So I was stuck drinking my Ensure at the dining room table. Because we had this like meal area where everyone would eat, and there were multiple tables and everything. And I was so mad at him for being the director and not listening to me. And I was so proud of myself that I took my cup of Ensure and I threw it at him and like drenched the entire front of his suit. And of course that wasn't good. My punishment that time was that I had to sit in this yellow plastic chair and I couldn't move for like, I think it was 30 minutes to an hour. I just had to sit there. But I was proud of myself because I was like, I'm giving it to the man. Like,
Yeah. You're like, this is the guy.
Yeah. Like no one's listening to me. Like, this is not what's wrong with me. No one's listening. My parents would constantly say, we don't think she's getting better. And they would say, oh no, she's getting better. Like she needs to stay here. She's getting better. Like she's gaining weight. Everything's great. And so my parents would be like, okay, like they were trying to trust the process that I was getting better, but I wasn't getting better.
They weren't fixing the root cause.
And so I finally decided to take matters into my own hands. I think a big combination of it was me trying to get out and me being so heavily drugged that I wasn't in a proper state of mind. Like I was a zombie, but I was also kind of aggressive because these are mood stabilizers. Like Zyprexa is an antipsychotic. Like I was on some heavy shit, and I was tiny, So one day everyone was in therapy and I left the therapy room and I came flying down the hall and I charged the nurse's station. I wanted to break in to the nurse's station so that I could call 911 is what I was trying to do. Thinking now about it as an adult, I'm like, what would 911 have done? They would have just put me right back where I was.
Right.
But at the time I was like, who can save me? The police can save me. So I tried to get in there and I tried to call 911 and I couldn't get past. So I switched gears, ran into another room, and they tried to like get me. So from what I remember, I flipped a table. And evidently when I flipped that table, I broke somebody's puzzle and I ripped somebody's book, which I didn't know that I did until later. My parents had to pay for it. But I got out of that room and that barricade and I ran down the hallway to where there was like when you come into the room, you have like that inpatient admission and then you're able to enter the hospital. So there's like an intake room in between.
Yeah.
So I made it into the intake room and I was so close to getting to the outside because at that point I was just going to run. And somebody stepped in between me and the door and stopped me. And the next thing I knew, I was surrounded by nurses and I was being dragged into what they'd call the quiet area, which was a padded room with a blue plastic mattress on the floor. And I was held down on the ground with both my arms up and a pill was shoved in my mouth. I don't know what it was. But the next thing I know, I had woken up and I was in a wheelchair in an elevator with my parents. And I was told that I was being moved to the child psychiatric unit, which apparently they told my parents was like not a good place for me to be and that I needed to be at the eating disorder hospital, but they couldn't handle me there anymore. I had to go. So my parents were terrified to take me there because they made it out to be this like super scary part of the hospital.
Right.
And it actually ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me. I was there for a week. So in comparison, I was at the eating disorder unit for a month. I was there from a little over a month. I was there from January 3rd to February 12th. And then I was moved from February 12th to the children's psychiatric unit. And I was only there for a week. It was really nice. Like you had your own room. You had your own bathroom. Like this was like a step up. Like I had just been in a situation, right, where I got 5-minute showers and like all these things. So I was like, this is amazing. Like I have my own space.
You would have thought it would be the other way around.
Right. I had my own space, my own room. It was a very structured schedule. Like I'd get up and shower and then eat breakfast and like the kids would all play and like we got to go play at the fitness center and like it was very normal. Like it felt great to be around other kids. And it was scary at times because these kids were actually like hearing voices and hallucinating and were truly suffering with a lot of psychiatric issues. So that was a little scary to see, but everyone there was so warm. All the nurses were so warm. And when we met with the doctor that was the head of that unit, he said, I'm going to change her medicine. I'm going to give her this medicine instead. And if she starts eating, then she doesn't have an eating disorder. And within like a day of my medicines being changed, I was eating everything. Like I was ravenous. I was eating breakfast. I was eating lunch. I was eating dinner. I was ready to go home. Like I was feeling great. I wasn't having the anxiety that I was having. So yeah, I was only there for a week. And I got to go home, and the recommendation was for me to go back to the eating disorder hospital, but they had proven that that wasn't what was going on with me.
Within a week,
compared to torture and hell for an entire month, with just like constant mental, just like abuse.
You would have thought it would be
Right, that I would have been there for a really long time, but all it took was them finding the right medicine to get my, anxiety in check, or what they believed was anxiety in check, for me to be able to eat and not feel sick.
What year was this?
2007. Yeah. So I was, I got out of the hospital. I went to this like program at the time called MSA. I don't know if it's still there. It was in Columbia, Maryland. They're great. They are like an after school program for kids that are, struggling psychologically or, socially, things like that. And that's where I met my psychiatrist. And I still see him to this day because he's the only person that has ever accurately diagnosed me. I found out in probably end of 2007, after he did like a deep dive into like my past and like when I was little and like my mannerisms and how I do things, that I actually have obsessive compulsive disorder. Back then, it was considered a form of anxiety. The DSM-5 that came out in 2014 now associates it as its own entity. It is now no longer associated with anxiety. OCD is its own thing. OCD requires typically medication that is given at a much higher, anxiety and depression medication, but it's given at a much higher dose because it is different. And I don't have the typical OCD. Like people, when they think about OCD, they think like everything's super clean, like everything has to be in its place, things like that. Mine was checking, like constant checking. I would like ask my mom before I got on the bus every day before school, am I going to be okay today? Am I going to be okay today? And she'd have to say yes. Or washing my hands a ton, or taking my temperature a ton. Like that was how my anxiety and my OCD manifested. Over the years, it's gotten easier to deal with, but I still do some things that I guess like you could say impact my day to day. Like, I mean, you and I know each other in college, but I didn't drink ever at any of those parties.
That instantly, like having this conversation, I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah,
it's not that she's against drinking. She's scared of what she was watching everyone else do. Oh, yeah. God. Why would you put yourself in that environment?
I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have the college experience that everyone else had, but I was terrified. I definitely was. Like there were times where people would start to, I swear I've had enough exposure therapy for like my entire life, but like there were times where I was driving, girls home and they were literally getting sick, and I was able to eventually associate it with alcohol, which made it a little different for me because it wasn't something I could catch, Yeah. My whole thing was like, I myself don't want to vomit. So I don't want to do anything that's going to make me vomit. If they're contagious, stay the hell away from me. But if you have an alcohol problem, I'm able to like check out a little bit more. And still handle the situation. I won't be thrilled about it, but I can handle it a little bit better. Now, if somebody like actively got sick on me, that'd be different. Like I wouldn't be able to handle that, I'm sure. But I definitely learned how to cope better.
Right.
From being in college and being around people that are getting sick. But it was really hard for me to like to go through all of that. And like like I said, I don't drink because I'm scared that I'll throw up. It makes my stomach hurt, makes me anxious, so I just don't do it. I won't get on roller coasters because I also associate that with getting sick. I don't like being trapped in confined spaces, so I don't like being on airplanes. I'll do it, but I need to drug myself to get on the airplane, just to make me sleepy so that I can handle it. I really don't love being away from home. Home is like safe space.
Yeah.
Like it's home plate. Like I like to be home.
So you're on cloud 9 when I told you I'd drive here.
Yeah. I was like, sweet, this is fantastic. Like, I mean, I leave my house, but I'm definitely more comfortable when I'm at home than when I'm elsewhere.
Yeah.
I like to be the one driving when we go places. And if I'm not driving, I like to sit in the front seat because I will convince myself that I will suddenly develop car sickness. It like sounds really crazy, but it's true.
No, you have a fear. You don't want to be in any kind of situation where you're possibly going to throw up.
Yeah. I overcook food. I promise I won't overcook your chicken tonight. My brother bought me this really fancy meter that like you stick in the chicken.
Bluetooth?
Yes.
Yes, I have. Well,
yes.
Somewhere with my move coming back down here,
yeah.
I lost it, and I'm like, that was $100.
It's like the best thing I've ever had because I'm terrified of getting food poisoning. Like terrified of it. So like.
And you ate Jeffrey's food.
I did. It's a miracle. But you know why? It's because it had bacon, and bacon to me was like safe because it was cooked thoroughly. And then the other was like mac and cheese. So I was like, he can't really kill me that bad, right? Like, I know. Now I think about it and I'm like, okay, that's questionable. But no, I do. I have a really hard time with it still. Like,
yeah.
I think things got a little bit different for me when Danny was diagnosed with cancer because he did get sick when he was initially starting treatment, and I had to clean it up because I didn't want him to clean it up when he didn't feel good. And every time he's gotten sick, I've cleaned it up, which is really hard for me. And I usually get through it, but then I like go outside and I cry for a second and then I'm fine.
Yeah.
But that also, again, is like, okay, this is like a chemo cancer situation, not a contagious situation. But it is still hard for me. And it's also another big reason why I don't want to have kids. Kids, I'm sure you know, are germ factories.
Oh my God.
And
I can't go 3 weeks without getting sick.
Yeah. Like I love kids. I love them. Like I would love to be a mom, but I mean, now we know that Danny's cancer is likely genetic, so we aren't going to do it anyway. But, I definitely am traumatized by the whole, like, me getting sick and having the stomach flu as a kid and, like, other kids being sick and my friends having kids and their kids are, I'm like, I don't want any part of it. I don't want to be near it. If they're sick, I'm not coming over. Like, I'm very paranoid about it. So, that's always been kind of a struggle for me too. But yeah, I mean, for a while, like I'm actually really impressed with myself and how far I've come because, there was a time where I just like, I couldn't be away from my parents. I couldn't, I wasn't living, at all. And so now I'm like, I have a full-time job. I own my house. I have a dog. I have a husband that I take care of because he has cancer. Like, I am doing all of these things and I'm able to do them. And if you had asked me back when I was going through what I was going through as a kid, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And I do feel really bad that there were instances where maybe I wasn't the best kid in the world. I feel bad for putting my parents through a lot of stuff. I feel bad for not being the nicest in school. But I also know that I was going through a lot as a kid and trying to navigate all of that and also try and maintain that I was somewhat quote unquote normal. I didn't want people to know that I was dealing with all of this stuff. So,
you're embarrassed by it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. And like when you tell people that you're scared of vomit, they're like, what? No one likes to vomit. And it's like, no, but you don't understand. Like I used to cry when I like was even near it or close to it or somebody got sick near, like I ran away. Like I couldn't handle it at all. So the fact that I'm where I am right now is kind of like a huge deal.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, they always say like with emetophobia, exposure therapy is the best, but it's kind of like a really hard.
How do you get exposed
right.
to?
Right.
You're not scared of throw up.
Right. Of myself getting sick.
Up.
So it's like, how do you get past that? Right. Like, how do you, and like, I had an instance, I think it was homecoming. Like,
oh boy.
I think it was like homecoming 2019. I think it was the homecoming where Jeff fought a tree. I think you took him home. So
yeah,
I ended up getting food poisoning and I was over by the suites and I locked myself in a room by myself and like got sick because I didn't want anyone to know I was sick. And then I proceeded to call 911 and had an ambulance come get me and take me to the hospital because I was freaking out and my parents had to come. They had to drive my car home. Like, yeah, it was wild. But then after that happened, I was good for a couple of months. Like I wasn't scared of it for a couple of months. It was the most freeing feeling.
Yeah.
But then it came right back. It's almost like I forgot that I was okay. I made it through it. I got sick. I survived. I made it through. Everything was okay. The world didn't blow up. But then like I forgot and all the anxiety came back. All of the OCD came back and I was like, okay, so what am I supposed to do now? Like make myself get sick every couple of months so that I can feel normal? Like,
well, if you need exposure, like,
no,
come on over.
Keep your kids at your house. No, I think that I'm working on it still. I've found out that I'm not the only one. When I was still on TikTok, I found a couple accounts of people who have emetophobia, and I was like very relatable. It was like when you have emetophobia and you overcook your chicken, or when you have emetophobia and you do this, and like, but normal people don't do it. And I was like, oh, these are all me. Like, this all makes sense. And so yeah, I mean, I definitely still struggle. Winter's the worst for me. That's why I really hate winter because I feel like everyone is sick in the winter and I'm even more isolated and trapped in my house because I'm scared of catching anything. So I love summer because I feel like the kids are out of school. There's not as many germs going around. It feels safer. So the winter time is always much harder for me to like get me out and feeling safe to do things. So
now, when COVID was here, were you telecommuting though?
I was. I got really lucky. Right before COVID hit. So Danny had only been diagnosed with esophageal cancer for like, I think it was a couple of months. And luckily I had gotten him on disability because he was going through some horrendous chemo treatments. And right before COVID struck, because he was a maintenance supervisor, so he was going into people's houses. Like while he's on chemo, his immune system's down.
That's a good way to get sick.
Right. So luckily with COVID coming on, he had gone on disability by like, I want to say December, I think. And COVID hit here in March. So January, we moved into this house of 2020. I started telecommuting in March when...
you bought this house at like right before you couldn't afford the house.
We can never leave. Our interest rate is so good. We're never leaving. I will die in this house. But yeah, so like we moved in and shortly after we moved in, Danny lost his health insurance. So then I tried to get him on different health insurance, and we were already engaged at the time. We had gotten engaged December of 2019. But we had to do an urgent wedding, in May because he lost his insurance, and the insurance we chose, his oncologist wasn't, a provider with. So, and we didn't want him to lose that oncologist because he was amazing. He still is. So we got married. I called the courthouse like crying, and I was like, I need an emergency wedding. Like, my husband has cancer. And, so we quickly got married in May, and then had like an actual celebration with just family, because we could only have 10 people, at my parents' house, in August of 2020. So yeah, but I pretty much did all my grocery shopping early in the morning, like at 7 a.m. before anyone was, up and doing anything. I was diligent with wearing my mask. I washed my hands all the time.
Yeah, because it wasn't even a matter of you being afraid of getting sick. You were afraid of getting him sick.
Exactly. Yeah. So we actually, I still don't think Danny's ever gotten COVID, knock on wood. He's literally tested negative every time I've had it. I've only had it once. And I didn't catch it. I didn't get COVID until 2024 or 2023. So we made it like 3 years before we even caught it. So
here's my mindset with it. So like, I spent a year balls deep in COVID, doing COVID missions, like around hundreds, thousands of people. Never got COVID.
Yeah.
I got done all my COVID missions. That winter, I got COVID.
Yeah, it's like doesn't matter what you do, I guess.
I got COVID the first time, and I know exactly where I got it because I didn't leave my house for like 3 weeks straight. I don't remember why. And then her family came up. None of them had COVID. And I went to the liquor store, the party for New Year's Eve, and I know for a fact someone in that liquor store
had it. They probably sneezed on you or something, and you didn't even know.
Next thing I know, I have COVID right before they're leaving.
Yeah.
And I could tell I had COVID because the vaccine, we were forced to get the vaccines in the military. I thought I was going to end up in the hospital from the vaccines.
Really?
Like, the more... I don't want to get fact checked. So I'm going to fast forward. But yeah,
you felt that it made you feel very sick.
I was screwed up, like hard time breathing.
Wow.
It was awful. But I could remember all the effects of it. And the moment I had COVID, I could feel the same kind of effects coming. And I'm laying in bed and I'm like, fuck. And Bree's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I have it.
Yeah.
And she's like, what do you mean you have it? I'm like, I have COVID.
Yeah.
What? How can you tell? I almost died from the vaccines. I remember everything.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I felt like I almost died. Don't fact check me. Don't.
Yeah, so I was one of the people that waited in line for the vaccine because Danny has cancer. I am a type 1 diabetic. My sister has a health condition that we're still working on getting officially diagnosed, but basically what we thought she had was chronic demyelinating polyneuropathy, which I know.
What?
I know.
What'd you say?
Basically, your nerves break down and your muscles aren't working as well. And she went through a lot of different treatments, but basically it's an autoimmune issue. Similar to type 1 diabetes. We have a lot of autoimmune in my family. And my mom has asthma. So my mom, myself, my sister, and my husband all got into the car and went to the M&T Stadium so that we could go get our vaccines because we were really scared, with all of us having all of our health conditions. We felt like it was better to get it than to get sick and something horrible happened. So we had to make that decision.
That's my thought process with COVID. Like, if you are already jeopardized in life as it is because of like everything your family has,
Yeah.
then yeah, get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it
And I'm
just
not
made,
going to say any more.
no, it's okay. Yeah, I know. It's still a very sensitive subject, still very taboo. I think that I like to hear everybody's perspectives on it, though, because I think it's very interesting to understand why people have their own beliefs and their own thoughts. And it's also a way to grow as your own individual, is to like hear other people's perspectives. So I'm always open. I'm not like one way or the other. I'm always open to hearing what, other people believe.
Yeah.
And I do think that science has come a long way in terms of like a lot of what happened with COVID has actually benefited people with cancer, because we knew that by making this vaccine, we knew we could manipulate certain things, and we were able to realize that we could produce something faster. And so a lot of cancer therapies kind of started flying out the door for clinical trials when this happened, because they became more aware of what they could do. So yeah, I mean, like it's a double-edged sword, obviously, for anything. People are always going to have bad reactions to stuff. And everyone's kind of got their own path. But yeah, COVID was really hard, because then I also knew people that were like throwing up because they had COVID. And I was like, no, I will be okay with losing my sense of smell.
Watch the pillow on the microphone.
Thanks. I was like,
Thank you.
no, thanks. I was like, I'm okay with losing my sense of smell. I just don't want to throw up. Okay. Like, I just don't want to do that.
I didn't have any of that. Like, I could still smell.
I didn't
still
lose mine
taste.
either. Yeah, I didn't lose mine either. My sister lost her lost her taste, and she started freaking out because she loves food. She was like, oh my God, I can't taste anything. It's like, it'll come back. It's okay. What a crazy time, right? Like, and now, I don't know. There's always that fear of getting sick, and I will always be a crazy precautionary person. And avoid certain things and certain areas and people that might be sick and people with kids during different times of year. But, I mean, I've definitely learned to cope. So, I got a couple of books on emetophobia, like workbooks that I was going to try and get through. And I like learned that I usually read before I go to bed. And I learned that I cannot read these workbooks before I go to bed, because then I will have a nightmare about throwing up. So I can't even do that. Like, it has to be during the day. So yeah, I mean, I'm still dealing with it. It's still hard, but it's gotten easier as I've gotten older, and people are starting to become more understanding of OCD, and that it's not just I'm organized,
Yeah.
And Luke Combs just wrote an article. My dad sent it to me. He was in an article, I think, with Fox News, that was him talking about he has OCD, but his doesn't have any outward mannerisms. Like, again, with the cleaning and mine doesn't really have outward mannerisms unless you were with me when I was 11 and frantically taking my temperature, and then you were like, something's not right here. Like,
well, I also think when you're 11 years old, that's when everything is the most sensitive too, because you're self-developing, you're growing, you have so many hormones going on, you have different axons that are becoming even more used.
Yeah, it's like a very like you're developing a lot during that time, and I essentially missed that entire year of school, because I had to go up against the Board of Education to prove that I was okay enough to come back to school, which was wild. I don't know why I was included in that meeting, but I was. So I had to prove that I was okay to come back to school. And by the time I came back to school, people thought I died. So they were like, where were you? We thought you died. I was being called like anorexic Barbie and, all these things. And so that made 6th grade sucked. 7th grade was really hard, because I was just moving from classroom to classroom, because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, because everyone had established their friends and I didn't get to in 6th grade. So I felt very alone. And then in 8th grade, I just couldn't wait to get out of there. Like, I was very, very anxious and a very sensitive kid. And sometimes my anxiety came out as anger, or I wasn't very nice to some of the other girls just because I didn't, I felt like they were all like coming after me or, you know, bullying me, even though maybe that wasn't their intention. But I was just my guard was so up because it had to be for like an entire year.
You're waiting for it to all go wrong.
Yeah. So things didn't really start to calm down until high school. High school is even still hard. And it wasn't until college, honestly. And even some areas of college were really freaking difficult with friends. And then now that I'm an adult, you know, I look back and I kept telling myself like, oh, you know, I had to grow up really fast because I'd been through all this stuff. I think I had to grow up really fast in certain areas, but in some areas I hadn't matured. And
you missed that opportunity.
I did. And so I think that I always thought other people weren't mature and that I was, and that, you know, I think that my thinking has changed over the years. And I realized that now that I'm 30 years old, I feel like I have now matured. Like I was not matured in college. I thought I was. I wasn't.
I'm going to pause this real quick just to check the stuff.
Yeah, go for it.
And we're back.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, like, I think that it really goes to show that there's like a ton of maturing that occurs during those years. You know, middle school sucks, but it is a part that is necessary for you to go through. And I unfortunately didn't get what would be the normal middle school experience, which maybe would have changed things. Maybe it wouldn't have. Maybe I would have had different friends. Maybe things would have been better. I don't know. Can't say. I just have to know that like what I went through made me who I am. I'm very empathetic to other people because like, you know, everybody's got something. So I feel like for me, I don't know. I guess it just made me who I am. And I've always wanted to be like, I want to get over it and I want to move forward. For a while, I thought maybe if I went to court and sued them, sued this place, sued, you know, whoever, it would make me feel better. But I was past the statute of limitations by the time that I looked into it. I was also unaware until recently that there's potential. They basically I sent an email to the director of this place, I think when I was in college, basically telling them what they did to me was wrong. But, you know, I've grown as a person and they were wrong about me and they misdiagnosed me and all this stuff. And they ended up sending my family a check for a couple $1,000 with nothing with it. And we didn't know why. And my psychiatrist was like, well, that's hush money. You know, obviously, because they just wrote you a check randomly. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I reached out and I got my medical records from them, which was really shocking. The Zyprexa that I was on, that they were giving me, actually went through a lawsuit about a year after I was in the hospital for causing diabetes. I didn't become diabetic until 8th grade. I was taking this in 6th grade. They said that it is mainly type 2 diabetes that is caused, like Zyprexa can cause. However, when I was in the hospital and I was taking Zyprexa, my blood sugars were high, according to my medical records that they sent me. So I don't know if something was starting then and no one was catching it. If it could have caused it, I'm not sure. And in addition to that, my medical records were just wrong, period. At one point they said that I had sickle cell anemia. Yeah, in my record. And I was like, what? No, like that's not right at all. You know, things were just mislabeled, miswritten. Facts that weren't true were in there. It was kind of wild. So glad I got the records, because I thought it would be really healing for me to know what happened, because there's definitely like places in my memory that are blank from being on all those drugs. But yeah, it didn't really help. It just kind of like solidified that I missed my opportunity to sue them and take them to court.
I think that also is like a really, I don't know. In one way, I say it could reamp everything, cause you to relive everything you went through.
Yeah.
On another note, it'll always be in the back of your brain until the moment you face it.
Yeah, exactly. And so full circle, like that's why I wanted to talk about it, because this is a case of being misdiagnosed. It wasn't until, again, recently that they recognized OCD as not anxiety, that it's a completely different pathway of your brain. And, you know, it's different, needs to be treated differently. And a lot of times emetophobia can cause eating issues, similar to mine. And it's not an eating disorder. It's something entirely different. And so I think that that's really important to just acknowledge that it's not always what it looks like at the surface level. So, yeah.
I'm sorry you went through all that.
So, I mean, like, my initial reaction is always, it's all right. Like, even when people are like, oh, I'm sorry your husband has cancer. And I'm like,
It's all right.
I hate it though, because I'm always like, it's fine. And I'm like, it's not fine, but I don't know how else to like respond to that, I think that the real answer would be, it's not all right, it's not fine, but it is what it is, and you learn from it, you grow from it, and you take from it to make your life better. And I like to believe that that's what I've done, that I've grown, that my compassion for people has grown, and that hopefully I can be a voice for somebody. So
That's beautiful.
thank you.
So when you went to college,
Yeah.
did you talk about this at all with anyone, or were you trying to be normal, even though absolutely nobody at all whatsoever is normal, let alone?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I was trying to be as normal as possible. Some of my sorority sisters knew what happened. But there was never like a deep dive. I never really like sat down and talked about it in depth. But there were people that knew about it. Some of them were more understanding than others. I have a lot of situations where I was accused of like flaking on people or not following through with plans. And that was really hard for me, because sometimes I would just get to a place where I couldn't handle the situation and I just needed to leave, or I didn't want to leave. And so it was seen as like me not following through with what I said I was going to do. Like if I said I was going to take somebody to a party and I changed my mind, or I was uncomfortable and I ended up staying at the current location I was at, it was taken as she's ditching us, and it wasn't taken as maybe she's just not in a good place where she feels comfortable going there,
Easily judged.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't really like that, hey, what's going on? Like, why don't you want to go? Instead of asking, it was assuming. And I think that's a big thing for me now. I think people need to ask more questions instead of just assume things about people, because you really don't know until you know.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So I did tell some people. Some people knew. I would sometimes tell roommates. Sometimes it would be used against you. I had been called crazy a couple of times. But, and that was a trigger for a while, like.
The word crazy?
Yeah. Because you're like, I'm not crazy. Like, this is very real for me. And just think differently, So that was hard, because I also met people that had some serious health problems, serious mental health problems, and I wouldn't go up to them and call them crazy,
No.
So, yeah, I think that for the most part, though, my college experience was good. Sometimes I wish that I hadn't. I think you always wish that you do things differently, though. Like I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish that I had approached this situation differently, or hadn't reacted in such an extreme way, or, removed myself from a situation that maybe like wasn't serving me. And so I do think about that a lot, though. You know, like, why did I allow myself to feel uncomfortable? And why did I react that way when I could have just walked away? You know, things like that.
Yeah,
So,
but I mean, all of that's like all learning
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
I
And then I
mean,
think that's back to the, like, I thought I was mature, but I really hadn't matured, you know?
Right.
So, yeah.
no, trust me, I'm one big fuck up. So trust me, I totally understand.
I mean, you got to fall a couple times, right? Like,
yeah,
or multiple. As long as you keep getting back up, I think that's what matters. And I always want the best for everybody. And so I throw myself entirely into everything. And with Danny, you know, now that he's been sick for 6 years, 5% live 5 years with his kind of cancer. And it'll be 6 years in May. So when he got sick, I threw myself fully into it. I think I could talk about cancer and esophageal cancer until everyone was blue in the face.
Right.
I know way too much about it. All of the different treatments. I'm in like multiple groups for people that I go on to speak about our story to help them through their own journeys. And so, I really care about people. And, as I've gotten older, I just want to make other people feel comfortable and like that they're going to make it and it's going to be okay.
A sense of service.
So, yeah. Like I feel like if I have to go through something really shitty, the least I can do is help somebody else that's going through something really shitty.
That's going to be the intro to this.
Oh, good.
Right there.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're all in this together, High School Musical? No. Like, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like if somebody else falls, you help them.
Yeah.
Especially when you know and you've been through it. And I will say it's really hard, though, when, like, you aren't able to help the person. Like, you try your best. It's like when he was first diagnosed, we met another couple that he was Danny's age and he was sick and it was in the same spot. He actually ended up getting COVID. And that's what happened. So it was like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Whereas like it would have been different. Did you just bring the dog upstairs?
No, he just crawled up the stairs because he
Oh.
doesn't want to be on the camera.
I thought he brought the dog upstairs. And I was like, oh God, he's going to run into all the camera equipment. No, but yeah, like I always wanted to help all these people. And it's really hard when somebody passes away and you thought you were going to be able to save them, And so that was hard for a while as I had to step away sometimes from some of the women's groups that I'm in who have husbands that have the same condition as Danny. And then you get survivor's guilt because he's still here, but their husbands aren't. And that can be hard too. So it's a double-edged sword. You can help them. Some of them are really successful. You feel bonded to these women, but then at the same time, you feel really guilty because for some reason he's still here.
Well, you can't jeopardize your own health.
Yeah.
And I mean, that sounds awful, but it's truthful. Like, you want to help people. You want to be there for them. You want to talk to them about it. But the moment that it starts affecting you, you start bringing it home.
Yeah.
Is the moment that you need to take a step back and say, wait a minute.
Yeah. And that's kind of, what happens, I feel like, for me, for sure, is I become really immersed in things. And I'm like, why am I sad? Oh, yeah. Something else happened to somebody. And now I'm just internalizing it because I'm very much of like an empath and like start to feel everything they're feeling. If you're sad, I'm sad, like,
Right, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, things are all right.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad things are good. I'm glad that you have been after all this time because I didn't even know about it.
Yeah. Surprise.
Yeah, surprise. Like 10 years later.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up, you have any questions for me or have anything to say?
No, I think that the biggest thing I've learned is to advocate for yourself and to fight for what you know is right. If you think that somebody is wrong, even if it's a doctor or a medical professional, stand your ground and trust your gut, because there is a chance that they are missing something, and that something could be really big and could be really life-changing. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, is advocacy for yourself when you know something's not right.
Yeah, that's been a huge push actually ever since after COVID happened.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people have started doing that.
Yeah. You just have to advocate and make them listen, you know?
Yeah.
If you know something's wrong, make them listen to you. So
I will throw this out there, just a bit of knowledge. If your doctors aren't listening to you or whatever, anything like that, or giving you a hard time, you can actually reach out to what's called a patient advocate, and they will basically be part of the army to do whatever's right for you.
yeah.
That is, I mean, that's just a little bit of knowledge I know.
No, for sure.
Most recently learned.
I've actually there was a time where I thought about being a patient advocate, because I was like, well, I do this for free,
Right.
for other people. Maybe I should do it. But who knows? Maybe in another life or
10 years from
or 10
now.
years. Who knows?
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Thank you for...
Of course. Thank you for
Coming
having
on.
me on.
Of course, and thank you for dinner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you haven't eaten it yet, so. TBD.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.